Welcome one, welcome all. And we have a race here at Gateway, which honestly provided a decent race in the trucks race. Despite getting a significant delay, there was some good racing and a late caution really kind of transformed the slate a little bit. And I saved Lane Riggs, who ended up getting fifth there. And he was one of those who really benefited from that late caution there, where I think all but like 6 or 7 cars pitted or did not pit. Yeah, pitted, and all of a sudden it completely changed the leaderboard there. And honestly, it was a good race. And we also had the Xfinity race yesterday in Portland, and my guy SVG ended up getting the W in a race where it felt like a roller coaster. It felt like every time he got into the lead, he would lose it. He even fell all the way to seventh at one point, midway through the third stage, and somehow, some way, ended up getting that W. Stats, I saw you at the top of the leaderboard there in both races late on. I actually did not see if it held, but how did those races go for you?
It did not hold. I was out and about. Couldn't watch them. Couldn't watch the races. I had some friends in town, and I popped on to DK. I think there was like 10 laps to go on the first race. I guess the trucks ended first, right? And then the Xfinity right after that. And yeah, I was leading in both. And I got a message from JBC. He goes, double, with the question mark. He's like, double winner here. And I'm like, oh, let me go look at it. And of course it faded, but still not too bad. I think maybe a top 5 on one of them, or maybe both of them, I think. So, but not quite what we usually are hoping for on these things.
Yeah, I knew both, except for the road course. I think that last caution, and then when we went,
yes,
you were in first, 100%.
Yes,
I was sitting there, I'm like, because I know I was 13 points off the pace on you, and I'm like,
I saw you. Yep, I saw you back there. I'm like, oh, Rubio's right there.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm like, yeah, I cannot beat that lineup. So I thought for sure that maybe you would have had it. But obviously, you know how road courses go. You get punted once, and you're falling way down the line, and all of a sudden, those leaderboards look incredibly different. Especially because it was the Brandon Jones wreck that ended up, I think it was Brandon Jones and Ryan Sieg who ended up wrecking out, and that kind of really, bundled up the pack, gave us another turn one dive fest there, and honestly, I love Portland. I love that racetrack they got up there, and it's provided some really good finishes the last few years too. So, we get it back today though, and you know what? We can't go, 5 minutes into the show without mentioning what you guys did over the week. I mean, all of RPS having a great day, but oh my goodness, what was it? A winner in NBA, 2 winners in NBA, a double shipper in baseball, right? What was it? 100K hit in baseball too?
It was, I don't remember. Yeah, well, it was 2 first places. Yeah, I think it was 100. Yeah, the 100. That's right. 100 on FanDuel, 35 on DraftKings in the same night. So 2 shipped first on baseball in the same night, and then shipped the or chop, in a pretty decent chop on the NBA that same night. So it was like a 180K night, which was pretty nice.
That's ridiculous, there. In one night across 3 slates, you had the showdown, and like I guess 2 slates because you won on both sites there. So
2 slates, yeah.
The showdown I know was 37K or something like that.
Right.
For the NBA showdown there. And we also have NBA finals starting up on June 6th. So don't forget that. You can sign up here with code RPS15, 15% off your first payment here at Run Pure Sports. And you can get every single sport along with SaberSim access that we do have as well, which I used SaberSim for MLB the other night. It is very easy to use. And once you kind of get into a rhythm, man, you can have some awesome combinations there at the top. Yeah. And
let me tell you something about Saber, because you mentioned the wins, right? So I kind of moved over. I think I mentioned this last week's show, but I started doing the MLB stuff on Saber about a month ago. So you mentioned this week hitting those 2 baseballs on there, and then prior week, I think since moving to Saber, in a total of a month, I've taken out 4 first place in big GPPs. So yeah, it's been really, really good. I'm excited that I made that switch over there. It's basically just incorporating a lot of the stuff that I do with the sims that they have there. And you're right, it is super easy to learn. And if you're in our Discord, there's the guys from Saber in there will answer questions. Plus, of course, all of us can answer your questions. So I definitely am a proponent of Saber. You guys need to check it out. It's a phenomenal tool.
That's great to hear. And obviously, if you sign up through Run Pure Sports, and you can get the ultimate package, or you can just get the base SaberSim package that we offer as well. And you can get our content plus SaberSim access all for one price as well. So, stats, let's go ahead and talk about this race here today. So, I think we got 240 laps. It's a 1 mile and a quarter track. It's kind of races like a short track rather than an intermediate. I know its size is kind of deceiving here, but I would say that, with a guy like Lane Riggs succeeding yesterday, kind of guys that we expect to succeed on a short track, this is a track that we can kind of compare more toward that style. And when we look at it here, I mean, I think I saw a stat on the broadcast yesterday that this racetrack actually does breed some cautions. Is that something that you kind of expect to see today? And what kind of racing are you thinking that Gateway will produce?
That's the hard part. I don't know. It's going to be hard to pass. I think that's the one thing that we know here. But it's interesting. I mean, let's just go over like kind of an overview of the track. It's a mile and a quarter track. We've got 240 laps. We've had a lot of cautions at this race, and there's only been two. For those who don't know, we've only had 2 races here, so we don't have a lot of history. And I think that's why maybe we could see some oddities here. Maybe we'll see some. I like to look at track history, and I like to look at comparable tracks. We don't really have a great comp track to go to here. Vegas may be the best comp track, but even there, it's not all that comparable. So we've got a flat track here. As you said, the trucks did race here at a mile and a quarter, but I think it's going to be really hard. They're running in the intermediate packages, but it's going to be really difficult, I think, to be able to look at maybe history. And I think we could get some real, maybe this is the one race here outside of these of the super speedways where we may get some unusual. Maybe we have to leave a little bit of salary. We may get an unusual winner, and we certainly have an unusual front row, which we're going to get to. And being how hard it is to pass, we're going to have one of those guys most likely leading a bunch of laps here early on in the race. Cindric was actually in that position last year as well on the front row. So I think it's going to be an interesting race. I think it's going to be exciting. And I think my suggestion here for builds is going to be a little bit more diverse than you want to be. Don't be afraid necessarily to fade the chalk. Speaking of chalk, you got Kyle Larson, like the greatest driver on the planet, is at 1,400 in the betting markets, which we haven't seen that. I mean, he's, plus 350, plus 400 week in, week out. And part of that reason we saw it, like Hendrick just does not look all that good. The Chevys are a long shot to win. You've got Fords with the best they've been in the betting markets by far. So Ford is like plus 150 to win. And that's really riding on Penske for the most part. So Penske's the second choice behind Joe Gibbs as far as teams here to win in the betting market. So should be interesting. And I think, we may be looking at, if we're going to play it the way the betting markets think it's going to go, we may have some drivers here that we haven't really wanted to get on. Some of the Fords that we haven't really liked so far this year, if you're going to go with the betting markets. But I do think it's going to, with just 2 races in the books here that we've had in the history, I think it's going to be possibly an unusual winner here for the big GPPs.
Yeah, that was actually something I noted, stats, is that when I usually, before I even build or anything like that, I'm going through my main team. And my main team, there was even a thought of leaving upwards of 1,300 just for a main team too, which isn't usually in the cards. Like usually I like to fill that salary. And I do think I am going to fill that salary in the end all be all. But what that did for me is when I ran teams, I was noticing you can easily leave more than 1K here and be unique. And I think that's going to give an interesting, look at maybe what you can do for large field tournaments. And what I did is I lowered my salary floor all the way to 48,000, which I don't like to be overly aggressive in that end, but I do think that there's a lot of like drivers who are very comparable to one another and can easily outscore one or another, whether it's a 2K gap or, 300 gap, right? Like, if you tell me there's a huge difference between like Ty Gibbs and Tyler Reddick when they're like the same exact odds and all that, like, I could easily just click Gibbs over Reddick, and maybe a lot of people kind of gravitate to just filling out the salary and stuff. And this, I feel like we have a good chance to have a unique winner at the top, and that's always nice to see. 100K up top too. So, hopefully it's me. Hopefully it's one of y'all watching, maybe if it's not me, or hopefully it's you. So it should be a good time ahead of us. And I do want to mention, with that unique, front row, it is going to lead to, maybe a lot of people wanting to kind of avoid that top 10. Maybe I'll play McDowell, Blaney, and Logano. Then don't want to play anyone else. But we have seen in these type of races that finishing position is so huge at this point. Like, how many drivers can you truly go ahead and point out are going to gain 10 positions? I don't really think you can do that with this race. I don't think there's a long list of that. And that's why I also think just getting drivers who can finish in the top 10 will be huge for this race today, and just being able to score those finishing position points rather than just targeting, guys in the back of the pack could pay dividends for this one here. So I like this comment by Izzy B. Phoenix, being a good comp track here as well. I do like that. We also have the past 2 years as well, where, a guy like Joey Logano, who is going to be popping up the page also along with his fast practice times. So it is good to see Fords with speed. I am very high on the Fords this week as well. And we also have BG3 in the chat, Gilliland and McDowell. Yes, I really do like that theory. Gilliland's one of my guys in the back markers there that we'll talk about a little bit later on. Good to see Matty Ice, Jake Swells, and of course, Uncle T in the chat as well. So, there's a golf tournament next week in Columbus as well. So maybe, just maybe, and UFC is in Louisville. So Stats, I don't know if you're going to be up this way or not, but it'll be.
I'm still up in the air. We got some things going on. I'm pretty sure JBC's heading over there, and then there's wrestling there too. So Raw, I think, is going to be there. So he doesn't like to miss any of that. So you give him UFC and Raw in the same city on the same weekend. He's usually going to be there for that. But I will try. I will try to be a last minute. I've had so much stuff going on with these weekends. This is the first time I've sat down at least at home since Friday. So I wouldn't mind a weekend off to tell you the truth.
No, I hear that. And it's also wedding season. I don't think I'm going to be able to go to the UFC one. But if you guys are in the neck of the woods, I would definitely travel down for at least a day. So let's go ahead and dive into the stud range here. We're going to sort it by salary here. We're going to get the RPS projections up. And when I look at it here, Stats, I look at it, I'm like, Hendrick is just not the car to beat. And what you can kind of expect here is I think a lot of people are going to click on Larson just based on his name, right? Like what he has done for this year in total. I think 15% is a little bit too low. I do expect him to be more like 20, 25. I do think a lot of people are still going to gravitate to these Fords. But when we look at 10K and up, we do get 6 drivers. And two of those happen to be Hendrick. You have Hamlin and Truex there as well. Then you got Blaney and Bell. I mean, Bell last week looked very strong, right? And obviously this is a different track and stuff, but I was wrong on Bell. I didn't like him much at all. And sure enough, he was very much in the winner there, and helps having the rain shorten that race, and deciding not to resume it did benefit me, but still it was a wild decision there to not resume that in Charlotte. But really, all 6 of these cars have been pretty strong. And I think Blaney is probably going to be the most popular in this range today, or Hamlin. I do think it's going to be one of the two. I do think Blaney does get steamed up pretty heavily here into the mid-30s, and I think that's going to be where Hamlin is going to be. Then it'll be Larson, and then I believe it's kind of going to be a little bit of a mishmash between Truex, then Byron, then Bell. This is a range where I can't get excited about playing Truex right now. I just don't really know what to do with him because he's going to be a glue piece. He's not exactly a dominator, but he's going to have very strong top 5 odds, as we know. He's going to hit a lot of teams just based on what he can do with the PD position, PD points that he can produce. What are you planning on doing with him, and who are your favorite studs in this range?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Truex because I think, his practice times, and I think he can kind of throw that stuff out. His qualifying, I think he's one of the guys here. He's in this range. He's the only guy with any sort of significant place differential points potentially out there. And I think he's got top 5 potential for sure. So I actually like him here. And I think what you're looking at in this top kind of stud bracket, and you mentioned Blaney's probably going to be the highest own here. And he's, the Penske's, we talked about it. He's right there behind Hamlin, I believe, in the betting markets. So if not, if not the favorite. I didn't even look here. No, he's just behind Hamlin right now, almost the co-favorite, depending on which book you're looking at. So I think Blaney's going to take a chunk of the ownership. I'm looking at in that 30, maybe 35% range. But I think what's interesting is we talked about Larson and his price, and that we just never see him at 1,300, 1,400 in the betting markets. I think you have a chance here. While he is starting 13th, I think this is where we may be able to maybe get some leverage on the field because, like I said, this may be a unique build here. I don't really none of the chalk. I think you can make an argument really against a lot of the chalk in this race. And if you want it in GPPs, I kind of think the way to play it maybe is to fade the Fords and hope that that's just not good. Like the Fords are just not going to be as dominant as people think they're going to be in this race. So I think, especially with a single bullet entry into a big GPP, I think you can. It's very rare you get to do this, but take Larson as maybe a contrarian play to some of these others. Hamlin, of course, is going to be owned. He's the favorite here. Starts 6th. And like you said, Christopher Bell. Look, Bell has not been as bad as the record has shown this year. And maybe he obviously catches a break with the weather because who knows if he actually winds up winning that race. And then he had a whole lot more laps for his pit crew to screw up that they didn't get a chance to do. So that worked out in his favor as well there last week. But yeah, I mean, in the top here, I think you can really make a case for all these guys. Byron, Bell. I mean, Bell could easily get out in front here, get some laps led. I think this is where you really want to be contrarian. I would lean away from as much as I like Blaney here. They look like they're gonna be fast. I think this is where we can make some contrarian plays, and that's where I want to kind of try to take a shot here at scooping 100,000 as opposed to chopping it 50 ways.
So you think you're going to be a little bit higher on the Hendrick side of things than banking on what they've done this season, right? What they've done this season has been the most dominant team. I mean, it's been clear. I mean, you can kind of make the case for guys like Hamlin and Truex and Bell, where they've racked up a few wins here. But yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from. And, when we look at the practice speeds, obviously everything's indicating, Ford's going to dominate. But, it's not bad to bank on the Chevys here. I mean, who's going to tell you you're an idiot for doing that? No one should. And what you got here is you got, not only just damn good drivers, but we've also had proven equipment and what they've been able to do. And, I don't hate that at all. I do think I was going to kind of be a little bit even to the field on Byron or whatever, but I do think that I might bump up, Larson here as well and kind of go under a little bit on guys like Bell. Truex is it's really hard for me to avoid, even though I don't think he's going to get a top 5 per se. If he gets 7th, he still has a chance to be in the optimal. And the reason for that, what if McDowell just went out and ran the first stage? Well, if he led 45 laps there, what it does, it not only allows me to spend up for a guy, or it could be Cindric who also leads in that sense, but it also just makes the Dom points between this group very, very hard to come by. And you don't have to nail it as much. And I do like that theory that you got there with Larson and guys like Byron on Team Hendrick there. Let's go ahead and think about a question here that I see. We got track is supposed to be a little bit warmer from what he saw earlier. Could that change a few things for your stats?
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be like 15 degrees warmer than it was in practice. So we'll see. I mean, the guys who were kind of full on the throttle the whole way in practice aren't going to be able to do that. So we could see some of the guys who maybe were a little faster in practice won't necessarily be the fastest cars out there today. So I do think it's going to have a significant impact on the race. That's why I said it's very difficult to handicap this one in particular, because I think the practice times I would take with a grain of salt. And again, history at the track, I'm going to take with a grain of salt. And any of these tracks where it's hard to pass, no matter how fast you are, not going to really matter when you can't pass the guy in front of you. And that guy, and if you get someone out front who may not be the best car, but is blocking really well, that's going to be a factor as well. But I do think, yes, for sure, the temperature differential, and it's going to be sunny as opposed to the overcast that they had when they're practicing. You will see this track perform a bit differently.
So yeah, that's very, very interesting. And I also just got a tweet as well, and it's guys like Ross Chastain, who obviously drives a Chevy, starting 16th. And this is just a quote from Paul Kress, he did an interview. I don't get a chance to bring up the interview. I actually probably should do it for the show, but he does think that he will race far better than what he qualified. Which, if someone in a Chevy is bullish, it would make sense that a lot of them in the Chevys are bullish there. So very good. I do like that path. I'm actually going to kind of adjust my exposures here when we get done with the show, and can't wait to build out the teams and see what we end with here. Let's go ahead and move on down to the 9K range. We got about 4 drivers here. We got Tyler Reddick. We got Brad Keselowski. We got probably, I would say, one of the most chalk drivers today in Joey Logano. And then we got Chase Elliott as well. So when I look at Logano, there's two reasons to like him, right? It was great in practice, and we also had someone kind of mention, Jake. It was North Wilkesboro is another track comp that he thinks. We know what Logano did in North Wilkesboro. He didn't give up the lead once, it felt, right? I don't think he ended up losing the lead at all that race. I think he led every single lap. And what you also have is what he's done here at this track. He's got a first and a third here in the last 2 years. Logano seems like the guy to beat in this range. A little PD bonus as well. You got Chase Elliott coming from 17th, who is fine, right? I think it's one of those things where he's cheap enough to absolutely fit some teams. I like Ross Chastain for 800 cheaper. I got to be able to like Chase Elliott as well. You have Brad Keselowski, where Team RFK has been just phenomenal the last month. We're going to like Buescher, I assume, for PD, but can Keselowski hold position, and can Keselowski work his way to the front? And then Tyler Reddick flashing some speed last week as well. I think there's a reason to play anyone from these four here stats. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Reddick, Reddick looked really good last week. Like, we kind of knew he was going to be able to maybe pass some cars, which he was able to do. I don't particularly like him as much this week. The flat tracks are really not where he performs well. So with his start position of 5, I'd be really cautious playing Reddick this week. Keselowski, I mean, they're starting to really kind of pick it up here. He's been good of late, but the last 2 times out at this, or the only 2 times at this track, did not go particularly well for Keselowski. Where was he? 28th and 20th at this track. But again, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. So I do like Keselowski a bit as a bit of a contrarian play. I mean, he's in the 4, but he's in like the worst, the worst odds. The RFKs are plus 1,000. So we'll see. As far as that, the betting markets really don't like them. Starting 7th, obviously, he's going to have to get his way to the front. He's got a chance to get some down points. Logano, as you mentioned, though, he's going to be the favorite here. He basically was the fastest car out there with Blaney. But like I said, I think what we saw in practice may not translate to today. So I think we need to look for reasons to fade some of the chalk here. And, if we're wrong, we're wrong. But I think I love situations where we could fade chalk on these, especially in NASCAR. And I just think this is a track that we could do it. So while I like Logano, obviously we saw what he did here. He has the ability to dominate, and that could certainly happen again today. But I think if you want to start, we can't fade all the chalk. So if you want to take Logano with the 12th starting position, and maybe just fade his teammate Blaney, then go. We could do that. But I would be looking at these pockets for the cars that are going to be, or the drivers who are going to be the most owned, and not necessarily fade them all. We could pick our spots here, but if you're going to fade, I think Keselowski, even as bad as he's been, I think you can go ahead and take a shot there. Chase Elliott, he's got some place differential value at a 17th start. I think even on FanDuel, it's even better. He's super cheap there, but at the 9K, I don't think it's a terrible move to get off and pivot over to a Chase Elliott, even though he really hasn't been great here. It's not a terrible play, but Logano for sure is going to be in that. He might be the highest owned. I don't know if he's going to be the highest owned, but he's going to be one of the highest owned here, maybe at 35%. But for NASCAR, I think we're going to have like the chalkiest play is going to be the lowest owned we'll see at a lot of tracks. I don't think we don't have like that 45-50% guy here. I don't believe this week.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I don't see anyone getting steamed up to like 50% or anything like that. The case for Logano, right? It's like he's basically got the same odds to win, as guys in the 10K range, right? He's actually got better odds. He's 7-1 on DraftKings, plus 700, minus 110 for a top 5 and stuff. Like, I do think that if anyone's going to get steamed up to that 40% mark, it would be him. Just based on, track history, based on practice, based on odds. Like, you have a lot of things going in his favor, which I do think that's going to end up seeing him kind of eclipse that mark. A conversation that we, had earlier in the season, but don't really touch upon now, which I think is kind of a factor today, right? where you kind of mentioned kind of grasping the unknowns, right? What do we do with this unknowns here where we got hot weather, we don't have a huge sample at this track, practice is far different than what we might see in the race today, just in terms of weather. Are you more inclined to kind of play teammates? I know that you mentioned Hendrick, you're going to be a little higher on Hendrick, but if you're like, you know what, I think the Fords are just going to dominate. And I know we've had this conversation before, but like, you mentioned it, like, would you be more inclined to pair Logano with Blaney or then like, pairing Chase Elliott with Larson, right?
Yeah, I actually like that because when you do have these unknowns, you just never know which team, which manufacturer, but usually team specific is going to have something figured out. And I mean, it just happens week in and week out. We'll come on the show, we'll analyze it, we'll give you what the history was, and then they go out there and you're like, man, I didn't see that coming. Like, and it's always going to be that way. Now, even though this year has been a fairly chalky year as far as who has won these races, which has not been kind to me in the betting markets because I do like to take, I do like to take some prices on the bets. But yeah, I think we'll have surprises if what I think is going to happen today, which is I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen, then we probably want a team or make our lineups maybe team centric because I think if the team figures it out, we may see, the more unknown it is, you have the better chance, I think, for a team to have things figured out and really going. Or, the other thing is if they're on a certain pitch strategy and that sort of works out, that could benefit the teams as well. And I think pitch strategy today could be important because again, when you can't pass, getting and sometimes you get lucky with that on when the cautions hit, and we are expecting quite a few cautions in this race, so that could be a factor as well. If these guys all pit at the same time, whichever team it may be, and then they get out there, and they get lucky as far as when the caution hits, as far as they're right after they pit, that could be a thing where the teams. We get 3 drivers from the same team in the winning lineup. So I like that strategy for a race like this, especially.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting too, like the first stage being, the shortest of the bunch by far, 45 laps for the first stage there. What you're going to see is extended green flag runs, potentially in that second stage, but also stage 3, where, just the final stage of the race there, where we saw it in the trucks race, when you pitted was a huge factor. And also like one of those things too, where especially on the lower end of the table here, right? If you like get the last guy to pit and he's got the freshest tires, who was it? Derek Krause a few weeks ago, like, kind of bunching up teams in that sense too, where it's like, oh, I might as well just play the teammate down there where, for the sake of an example, I know Gilliland isn't the cheapest, but like, oh yeah, I'll pair Gilliland with McDowell, right? Like obviously that team could have pace. Gilliland and McDowell pit maybe late, and all of a sudden Gilliland gets a bunch of fastest laps or something like that, right? There's always those unknown factors that we can't really predict for, but playing teammates, playing those teams on the same pitch strategy can absolutely come into play. We have a question from Dwayne here. Hey, Stats, DK is offering a 33% boost today. Do you like Blaney over Byron and Logano over Busch at plus 214? So I assume that's a parlay.
Yeah, it looks like a parlay. I actually don't. Yeah, I don't particularly like it. Off the top of my head, it was hard for me to actually look at the value on the bet, but just looking at it, yeah, I don't particularly like it. There, the thing, Busch could be. We didn't get to him. We're about to. Yeah, Kyle Busch has been really good here, as bad as he's been, and again, we could take with a grain of salt history, but yeah, I'd have to crunch the numbers there. But my first instinct is I don't particularly like the bet. And these boosts, by the way, the boosts in general, like they usually are still negative EV plays. So they're basically boosting a really shitty play to a less shitty play when you get these boosts. So they're negative EV. So if you're just blindly playing the boost, you're going to lose money.
For what it's worth, it is boosted in terms of, I think it's 33% boost on any NASCAR bet. So okay. I assume that is after the boost. Though.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if they're, then you're going to get some value.
Which would you prefer just doing that on a winner at that point? Like, a guy like Ross Chastain's 40-1, throw a 33% boost there on him, like something like that. I know
absolutely.
That. You'd rather just do it on a winner at that point.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive into the 8K range. And I actually am very interested to hear what you got to say about Kyle Busch. He ended up making my main team last week, Stats. Not something that I really expected. I think he got a pit penalty. I think it was a crew member over the wall too soon in the first stage. And he had decent pace. Like, I'm not going to sit there and say that's a bad play or anything. I definitely think he could have gotten a top 10. The rain shortened race did him no favors, but what he did show last week was some speed. What you mentioned here, what he's done in the past, makes him a decent play here at 8,800. He also got Ty Gibbs, who I think he's basically Tyler Reddick, for 1K cheaper. That's how I'm kind of viewing him. He also starts a little bit further back, 4 spots, which matters a decent bit. I don't hate him at all. You got Chris Buescher, who's going to be one of the more popular PD plays, starting 26th. You have my favorite play of the day, and I can go ahead and just give away the driver of the day in this scenario. But I think Ross Chastain is going to be one of my favorite options at 8,200. I was on him before the interview where he said that, I definitely think we're going to race better than where we qualified. But I am on him, and I'll go ahead and get it to him after you speak. And we also got Alex Bowman and Hendrick starting 14th. So this 8K range here has honestly quite a few options to select from. And when I've seen stats, when I also did my slams, cores, field, whatever we do there on the playbook and stuff, I don't have a ton of fades, and a lot of that just has to do with I think all these plays can make a case for themselves, right?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I don't fade a lot. I probably don't flat out fade a lot of guys normally week to week, or certainly compared to other people who put in 150 lineups. But yeah, this week is not going to be there. There will not be too many fades. I think in this group, if there was one guy that you could consider fading, I think it's Bowman. He'll be the lowest owned of this group. I don't really see the upside with Bowman starting 14th. I just don't see him with a top 5 type of performance here with Hendrick. But again, I think there's better contrarian plays than Bowman. But again, who knows? I think Buescher though is really the guy here that we're gonna. He's given us the best place differential, 26, and I think he's a safe driver. I think he's your core cash guy for sure. You've got to have Buescher in there, and I think he might make. I haven't done the cores yet. He might be a guy that makes maybe the core on my core lineups as well for GPPs, just because of that place differential. Now we have seen in the past here, it's usually I think you were mentioning something about this earlier, where we're really just looking for finish position. And that's true. When we look at the historical, and it's only 2 races, but the history here, it's really been finish position. So a lot of the drivers have started really in the top 15, and then maybe one driver that's coming from 25th or higher at a start position. So I think Buescher is one of the better candidates to be able to be that big place differential guy here today. Gibbs, again, he'll be owned as well. I think, with JGR favored over Penske. You've got a guy at 8,600. I think he's going to be popular. People love Ty Gibbs. I like Ty Gibbs here as well this week. I think getting to, like I said, one of the better manufacturers, not manufacturers, but one of the better teams this week at the cheaper price, starts 9th. No reason. I think he can get out there. He's going to be, one of the potential dominators for this race. So I do like Gibbs, even though he is going to be fairly owned, 30 to 35%, I would imagine. And I think another guy who's going to get some ownership. Kyle Busch, seems like every week we're like, what do we do with Kyle Busch? But I mean, this is a guy, he dominated this race. I don't know how many laps did he have. He led 121 laps last year on this at this race, and then the year before had led 66 laps. So he's had a first place finish and a second place finish, right? I think he finished first and second in the 2 races that were here, and totally dominated in those races. So obviously he likes the track. Chevy, we've talked about, they're just not this is like the worst odds that we've seen for Chevys. But yeah, Kyle Busch is an interesting play. I just think he's going to be, I think his ownership is higher than necessarily where it should be based on the history that he has here. So I think you want to be under the market. I'd want to be under on Kyle Busch because of that. I think he's just going to get overplayed because of how well he's done. And like I said, just because those 2 races, I think he regresses. And I think this is a good opportunity. I think in this range, he's the best opportunity for a fade. I kind of don't necessarily want to fade Buescher. I like Gibbs. And then Chastain is the guy you said you want to talk about. But I think Chastain's a guy where he hasn't looked very fast, but he does have the potential. He had a good finish here because of pitch strategy. So who knows if that happens again? And he's capable if he gets, if they get the right pitch strategy, who knows? He gets out front. He is capable of winning. He's going to be very low owned. Maybe that's your guy that you're going to be picking, you said, for your sub 20% owned guy. Interesting choice. Starts 16th. And I do think he has outside shot potential to win the race.
Yeah, so this kind of goes into the point of when I think we were jamming Busher. It was a while ago. I think he was like starting, somewhere in the top 5 or whatever, but he wasn't going to be a hugely popular player or anything like that. But you have to like look at the options around him, right? There isn't a ton of guys who I'm just going to sit there and say, oh, that's a smash. That's a smash. Like what I like to do is I like to look who's below him that I could play and who's a better play. And I think you can make the case for McDowell or Cindric, even Josh Berry, who I really like too, which we'll get to in the 7K range. And I do got to do a better job of speeding up this show because I know we got MLB lock and stuff. So I'll try and be quick. But I look at it and I'm like, Chastain's better than a bunch of these guys. Busher, I would take Busher straight up. If you had me on a bet, I would take Chastain plus 200 against Busher if you offer me more fantasy points. But what Chastain's going to do, it's going to get me a little bit unique. And he is going to be in my main team. I just think that 8,200 for a guy where if he drives into the top 10 is probably going to be optimal. And I think that's the case here. And what we saw, 2 years ago and stuff is fine, got 8th or whatever, but you also look at the practice speed. His practice speed was very solid, 7th in the individual lap, I think 8th in the rolling 10 lap. I just think, the interview there too, where he just commented where he thinks he's going to race much better than where he qualified. A lot of things are going in his favor. And I'm very, very happy to kind of, go with him here. So, and he also fits my build, very well too. It doesn't, leave me to leaving a ton of salary. He is my last piece in, but I am going to make him a core play because I'm going to be significantly overweight for that reason. And it's going to be because there's not a whole lot of great options here. I'm going to kind of embrace that little bit of unknown in that sense. And, jamming a guy where, I think I'm going to be doing 50 in the 18 and I'll be very overweight in the $4 as well. And that's the tournament stand of the week here. It's going to be Ross Chastain in this range. Let's go ahead and move on down to the 7K range now. And we're going to get to Josh Berry, who Isaac Atkins asked. Josh Berry, top 10. So I don't need to read off the drivers' names, but we do have a few drivers in this range. And I think Josh Berry is the best of the bunch stats. Is there anyone else who also catches your eye here?
We're going to have some ownership at this price range. So yeah, Berry might be the highest owned guy on the slate, which is
yes,
kind of unusual for someone down in this price range. But starts 29th. The track really sets up nicely for Berry in a Ford. Talk about the Fords all week, and he was fast. So great starting position at 29th. I think. It's tough. He's got to be certainly a core cash play for you and a tough fade in GPPs, I think, as well. So I think it's going to be I do like Barry. Gragson is going to be high owned as well. Should be in that 25-30% range, I think, for Gragson. He's in a great spot as well. These are all the Fords, by the way. The Briscoe, Gragson, Barry, all SHR. And they just announced, right, that they're shutting down operate. So who knows if that changes anything? Probably not. I don't think it changes much here this week, but we'll find out. Maybe they just all shit the bed as chalky plays. I don't know, but I like the way Gragson has looked. I think he's destined to be a star, and in Cup here in the future, and at the 30%. It's going to be tough. I don't know if you could play all of these guys, Gragson, Briscoe, and Berry. Again, like I said, it seems a little too chalky for me. But I have a tough time going against these guys. Now, on the other side, like flanking them at the highest there, 7,800 is Bubba Wallace. Really had decent speed, but I don't know what the upside is here starting 8th. I can't really see him getting out in front, leading a bunch of laps. So I don't particularly like that. If you wanted to totally fade Bubba, that's fine by me. And then the other guy, Eric Jones, to me, this is just not going to be. This is not a track for him, not his week, and that's another guy you could fade. But real interesting in the middle. I think you got a bulk of the ownership today is coming right here in that 72, 7,400, and 7,500 price tags.
Yeah, exactly. With Josh Berry, he's going to check a lot of boxes for a lot of people. He's a great play, and also you got Noah Gragson there too. And you mentioned it, Stewart-Haas Racing shutting down after this season. Like, are we expecting a change? Are we not? And it's one of those things. I don't think you expect a change until you see it like fall off dramatically, maybe late in the season or whatever, when you just know teams are looking for the exit there, drivers are looking for their next team. And there's a lot of uncertainty around. And I think Josh Berry was the one who said he's relieved that like this whole thing of the future is kind of settled. Like they know exactly what's going to happen now. Now it's kind of just about finding your next team, hoping to stay in the Cup Series and stuff. But I think you just assume business like normal for Stewart-Haas racing cars here. And, until they show a huge amount of fall off, you just keep playing them. And a guy like Josh Berry, this is his type of track. A guy like Noah Gragson, we know he has a bunch of talent starting 27th. I'm very happy to go ahead and buy on. For the sake of time, let's move on down to the 6K range here. You got Ryan Preece, another Stewart-Haas car here, starting 32nd. This is a track that I thought I'd like him at stats, but he's just not hitting there with the speeds and stuff like that. He was much slower than his teammates as well in practice. It's a little bit concerning for me. He just hasn't produced at a high level this season at all. You got Daniel Suarez starting 31st. If I like Chastain, I have to like Daniel Suarez. That's the rule, right? That's the teammates' rule. But I did get a very high projection from me, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that not only was Chastain fast, but you also had Suarez who put up decent speeds in practice, enough speed where I think he is a candidate to get 10 plus PD points here, PD positions, I should say, move up maybe inside the top 20. And then you have your typical talent of, Hostvar, but we already mentioned Cindric McDowell. I think I'm going to have McDowell in a bunch of lineups, and I think Cindric is a perfect leverage play to that too. Like, I think that you play this front row today. Stats, that's the main talking point. Are you playing the front row much today?
Yeah, I think that's, I know we're up against it, but I think that's what we really have to look at here. McDowell, it's hard to pass. The front row is going to get laps. I mean, what I would expect is McDowell to lead. I mean, McDowell could easily just kind of lead the first stage, 45 laps here, and then fade away. And that's kind of what I expect to happen. So I think you do have to have some exposure to both of these guys. And I think Cindric is really interesting because he's not going to be owned. So we get a shot here of getting some decent Dom points, and maybe he's able to stick around the top and get us a decent finish as well at super low ownership. So I kind of like Cindric as that play off of McDowell, but I do think it's going to be McDowell who gets the bulk of the Dom points here in the early stage, if not all of them. But I don't mind that play to pivot and get over to Cindric. I don't know if you could, I just don't think you could play both of them. I don't think that's going to be optimal at all. So in your builds, you might want to just kind of play one or the other. But I do think they're both playable, even though I don't think Cindric is going to get much play at all in the market.
Yeah, if they were both optimal, I just wouldn't be happy, stats, because I am for sure separating them. I am for sure separating Cindric and McDowell. And what you're banking on there is if Cindric takes the lead, like you get that leverage off McDowell, or if McDowell takes the lead, like what McDowell's done 3 of the last 4 races, he's top 10, right? You lead the first stage and you get a top 10. That sounds pretty optimal to me at 6,500. So that's what you're banking on. Cindric was very strong in practice. He was second to Logano in 10-lap average, and McDowell was top 10 in both categories. Basically, it's hard to pass. If you're top 10 in both categories there, and you do end up getting the clean air and taking the lead, it's a good chance that you're going to lead a significant amount of laps. And by significant, it could be 25 to 30, but that's enough. That's enough. And that, you have to assume fastest laps are correlated with that. At least, the first 10, 15, like you're looking at a formula there for, someone to be optimal. And I do think playing the front row is huge today. Just any other thoughts on like a guy like Suarez starting 31st or anyone here that maybe I didn't mention? Gilliland, I mentioned that I like him too, being McDowell's teammate as well.
Yeah, I think those are the only 2 other guys that you really need to highlight. I think Suarez is a really good cash play today, and certainly you could get him in there for your GPPs. Gilliland as well, I think, is a good cash play, starting 35th. So both those guys starting in the 30s. I do like as cash plays, and I think you got to sprinkle them in. But I think they're both going to be, they're going to be in that low 20s, something like that. I think they'll both be in that ballpark. But yeah, fine plays, fine place differential plays. Ultimately, I think we're going to just get a couple of PD guys in the winning lineup, and I think the rest of it's going to be finish position, I believe. So we'll get a couple of guys down here. That's why everything's kind of ownership is kind of spread out. And I think it's going to be a tough one to win, but I think the winner is going to take home 100K today. So that's what that's what I'm thinking.
Hand in hand. And so let's go ahead and move on down to the 5K range here. And when I look at it, Zane Smith. So we had Zane Smith. He's my number one guy in this range. We had Reese Blanton asking, is Zane viable? We also have Lycan mentioning, yes, he's ran here a bunch in the in the truck series too. I like Zane Smith at all. I like Zane Smith a bunch. I didn't mean it like at all, as I don't like. What you're getting is a guy starting last, guy who actually showed decent speed in practice. Nothing like crazy, off the grid, but what he was 16th in the 10 lap thing, right? And I know we're not trying to just be biblical with practice times or whatever, but I am showing that he is much faster than last place. Is he a candidate to move up 10 spots? Maybe. You also have attrition that could be a very big factor there. And if we get a bunch of cautions like we have seen, Zane Smith seems like the only option down here that I get excited for stats. Justin Haley has been great all year. Maybe you can like him. Maybe you can like Nemechek. But I don't see a bunch of guys, and that's why Zane Smith really sticks out for me.
Yeah, I think Zane Smith's going to stick out. He's not going to be high owned, and it's funny. I'm actually discussing Zane Smith right now in a DM with one of the guys, but and he was just asking me about the Zane Smith kind of with his single entry, if keep him in or kind of switch some of the top side guys and save give us some more salary and move up to a Gratson. And I like that better. So I almost like not having anyone in this range, certainly in a single build. I think I would leave out this 5K range and try to fit your builds in basically from Cindric up is where I'd be looking. So my fear here with Smith is he gets lapped early in this race, starting last, and just never gets a chance to move up because he gets behind the 8 ball early in the race at a track that's really hard to pass on. So that's my fear. And so I'd be cautious. I think maybe I'd want to be under on Smith. I think some people are going to play him naturally just because of that start position, but I'd be cautious in the 5K range. I don't really love any of it.
Yeah, I think it's a good rule to make at most one of anyone sub 6K. I think that's going to be a good rule to have just because I think you get a little bit too thin. You have a bunch of guys who are already starting high up who can put up just strong finishing positions and put up good scores that way. You don't need to pass, more than 5 cars to really put up a good score. And what that can be like, right? That can be for guys like, Noah Gragson or Chase Briscoe getting like 15th or whatever. Like you can have guys like that who hit where if you're starting like Nemechek, he's got to get up, I think a decent bit there because the finishing points matter a whole lot when you start getting a little bit higher there. So I do think that is important. Zane Smith, I'm going to be overweight on just because he is the only guy I like down here. I think Haley being able to hold position could be key. Hocevar being able to hold position. But outside of that, it's a range that I really don't love. And yes, BG3 Zane has been bad. An early lap situation there would not be great because then you'd be relying on Rex and attrition, which I don't love doing that. I don't love doing that at all. But hey, I gotta spend down somewhere if I want to fit the studs like Logano and Blaney and whoever else I might have in my lineup. So should be a good one here. Stats. We got MLB here in 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and get you out of here with your driver of the day, sub 20% owned. Let's go ahead and sort by SaberSim's ownership here since I don't have mine up yet. So anyone at Bubba Wallace or below here for you.
Oh, let's see. Wait, hold on. I'm gonna have to look at your screen. I had Saber up, but I don't have it sorted right. So where are we looking here, Bubba? Well, you like Chastain, right?
Yes.
So he's putting Kyle Busch at what ownership?
He's putting him below 20.
Wow. See, I think Kyle Busch is going to be higher than that, so I'm gonna pass on that. I think this is the guy that my initial take when I first looked at it is going to be Kyle Larson. I mean, it's crazy that we're going to get Kyle Larson as a potential kind of, I don't know, what are we calling this play? Like it's not the under the radar, but kind of low owned play.
Yep. But driver of the day,
low owned driver of the day. To have Larson be that guy, I think he's got something to prove here. Last week was not what he was hoping for, and if anyone, the best driver in the world. So if anyone could come out here and show maybe at a track that doesn't necessarily fit him best, it could be Kyle Larson, and he could show up big today.
Yep, I like it. I know he's got to have a little bit of a fire under his ass there with the whole waiver situation where, pulling off the double, being able to show up at the track mid-race. It was looking like he was going to be able to go, and then NASCAR pulls the plug on it a little bit too soon. I know that whole situation. He should be granted the waiver without a doubt. I can't believe that's still playing out. I could see him kind of, having that win today and being able to kind of give a little bit of a middle finger to NASCAR in that sense, where maybe it's not as friendly as we must have thought. Mine is obvious. It's Ross Chastain. I mentioned it before. Not only the 8th couple years ago, but also the speed that he showed in practice. He's very bullish on what this Chevy can do as well. It's going to be very low owned. I don't think it's going to be 19%. I do think it'll be a little bit lower in the teens as well. Ross Chastain is my driver of the day. We also got Kyle Larson from Stats, the low-owned driver of the day, which, yes, we can't usually say that about Kyle Larson. We thank y'all for joining us, and good luck. No matter which slate you're playing today, whether it's MLB, NASCAR, anything, good luck today. Again, code RPS15, 15% off your first payment here at Run Pure Sports. Have a great rest of your day from Stats 9.